Dolly Madison's generous bosom. And just the phrase generous bosom, I am dying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, so we know Dolly's got big tits. Is this the deal?
Yes,
okay, so Dolly's got
exactly.
big tits, and people talk about it.
It's 200 years later, we're still talking about them. They really must have been something.
They must have been amazing.
History, I'd like to follow me down the rabbit hole. History, I'd like to, frankly, I want to know.
Hello, and welcome to HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody. My guest is Brian Kiley, an Emmy-winning comedy writer for Conan O'Brien and longtime fixture in the world of stand-up. And he and I are in something of a love triangle. We are both madly and unreasonably in love with history. And we discovered the fact while performing together because, for once, I wasn't the only nerd with a book at the bar. For this episode, Brian and I take turns sharing the funniest moments, the how could that have happened stories from the wide variety of timelines that we've dog-eared in our history books over the years. The Children's Crusade, John Glenn, Squeaky Fromme, and Andrew Jackson's Parrot are just a few of the stars of this episode. I'm so glad you're here. Before we jump in, will you give the show a little shot in the arm? And please leave us a rating and a review wherever you listen. When you do, you will have done your part to rescue a foul-mouthed comedian with an overpriced education from the painful realization that without this podcast, all I have is being good at bar trivia. Which I am, by the way, really good at bar trivia. But first, join me and my guest, Brian Kiley, for episode 16, History's Great Mistakes. Let's get started. Well, I'm delighted that you are here,
Oh,
Brian.
this is so exciting. Well, congratulations on your podcast. It's so great.
Oh,
It's really
thanks.
great. And I can tell, just listening, like your enthusiasm for it. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's your passion project, which is so fun.
Thank you.
Yes.
And you and I, if I'm remembering correctly, were we in Palm Springs doing a show
It
together?
it was somewhere out there, yes.
We
it was
were
like
doing
that,
some
yes.
one of those gigs where it's a couple hours
Jason
out of
loved
LA.
gigs, and it's out. Yes, you're out in the somewhere in the desert.
They're
old
so
because
fun.
yeah,
and
they
I
are.
think that this one it was like a gated community somewhere. Anyway, it was fun, and they were very nice. And you and I were both doing 20 minutes or something like that. And I had my book, I think I
Yes.
had my book on the spice trade.
You did, yes.
And you were book. It's sort of like when you suss out someone who likes your favorite TV show, or they're wearing a T-shirt with your
Yes.
favorite band, and
Yes.
you sort of want to venture in. Like I'd like to talk about that book.
Well, I was like, how is that? You know,
What are you reading right now? What is the book that you've got open at the moment?
I'm reading a book about the Battle of the Bulge. So my dad was in the Battle of the Bulge.
Really?
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yes. So, and this was a book I found in a used bookstore for like $2.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, okay, I get, you know what I mean? And it's one of these that I thought, oh, I'll read this in a day, but it's tiny print. And it's more dense than you realize. You're like, oh, this is actually, but it's actually substantial. So it's good. I mean, there are times when there's nothing worse than getting a book that you're fascinated in the subject and you bring it home and you go, oh, this book is terrible.
Oh, it's the worst. And it's funny because I'm always got a book for this podcast, of course. I will sometimes, I want a thorough account, but I am also keeping an eye to like page count. Because
Yes.
I can't, and
Oh,
I'm
my
like,
God, yeah.
And the book, I don't know if you can see it over here at the end of the table. This is my next
wow.
endeavor is Watergate.
Nice.
So I'm currently reading my Joan of Arc book, and I started this Watergate book. It is a tome. It's like 700 pages, and that tiny little print. And it's so good, though. I mean, I find
good.
Watergate,
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the
yeah.
marrow-
Well,
and I've read all the
Yes.
President's Men like years
Yes.
ago, and I've seen the movie. And so this book is like a new history of Watergate that takes into account everything that happened after, basically
Right,
1980.
right.
It starts in the introduction with who is Deep Throat. We now know who is
Yes,
Deep Throat
we
and that
do,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. So it's really fascinating. But when it arrived in the mail, I was like, oh, God.
I know that happened.
Before you and I
Sure.
deep up the annals of history, I do want to give an introduction to our listeners of my friend Brian. You're a comedian. You're everywhere. You've been performing comedy all over the place for a long
Yes.
time. You've been a staff writer, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, a staff writer for Conan O'Brien since 1994?
Yes.
The internet doesn't lie. Holy shit. And you've had 16 Emmy nominations.
Well, I just got one yesterday
17.
Well,
so did you win? Oh, no.
No. So I this past year I wrote for Ellen.
That's right.
We just got a daytime Emmy, which doesn't really count.
You don't second shelf.
Please, yes. But we did
use it as like a bottle opener. Keep it in the kitchen. 2007, you won. Was that that was for Conan or for? And that was the best writer for variety, music, and comedy. Mm-hmm. You've been on Letterman 6 times. You've been
7.
Jesus, 7 times you've been on Letterman. Yeah. You've been on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno 4 times.
Yeah.
And Late Night with Conan 12 times.
Yes. But here's the funny thing about all those. With Letterman and Conan, it was almost always a last-minute thing. Somebody canceled. And they're like, get out there, So
who cancels on Letterman?
Well, sometimes it's funny because I think in New York, it never happened at Conan and TBS because there's just so many people here.
Totally. Right.
But in New York, they would try to get somebody, from SNL or whatever, Al Roker did the show like 40 times, you know what I mean?
I mean, I can't. I know that you're familiar with the people there. You're more familiar with the environment, but it seems to me that it would be a daunting task to just all of a sudden be a quick last minute fill in on a late night.
Well, the crazy thing is, so Letterman, I didn't know I was in the running, and what happened was when I was 25, I auditioned for the show, and the producer came up to afterwards and he told me I was very good, and then I never heard from them, and then I would do an audition every once in a while, but nothing. So one day I'm at work. This is 17 years later. Mm-hmm. I'm at work. They call me and they go, "Hey, there's a weird question. Can you do the show today?" And I was like, "Okay." And it's 1:00. And I was like, "Sure." And they go, "Okay, we'll call you back." And they call me back and they say, "Okay, you're on. Dave is sick." So Bruce Willis is supposed to be the first guest. So now he's the host. So they needed an extra comic. And I was nearby. And I don't know how many people they called before me.
Goodness.
They might have had somebody else lined up who was out on the road, and they're like, "No, I'm in Chicago," or whatever. So I always kept a suit in my office because I had to do the Conan show sometimes.
Yeah.
So I just put my suit on and walked over there. And the beauty was I had a good night's sleep because I didn't know, you know what I mean? I didn't have time to get nervous. I just went and just like, okay, just go do it. So because of that, then they would subsequently call me after that and have me do it,
Crazy. And you just did your 5-minute set.
Yes.
Yeah. And then did you chit chat with Bruce Willis afterwards?
No, it's so funny. And the same thing, like he would shake my hand and then say, good job or whatever. Then they go to commercial and I'd say, "Hey, thanks very much," or whatever. And that would be it. And the same thing with Dave. Like with Dave, I'd say, "How's your son doing?" or something like that. Uh-huh. And he'd go, "Oh, he's great. How's Conan?" "Good." And then that would be that. And he would go back to his desk. And
So great. So how did you get the job as a writer on Conan?
Well, so I started doing comedy in Boston, and I started in college. And then I did it for like 12 years or something. And I would go on the road like 1 week a month, say. Mm-hmm. But I was doing shows every night, and I was kind of lucky. There were so many venues in Massachusetts or New England where, you'd be at a comedy club in Boston one night. The next night you'd be at a college in Maine. And then the next night you'd be at an Elks Club in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Or, then you'd be at a dive bar in Rhode Island. You know what I mean? Uh-huh. So I was getting a half hour every night.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Just getting all that stage time. I wasn't just doing 5-minute sets like you are normally.
Yeah.
Very quickly, they just needed bodies. So I was getting a half hour virtually every night for years. So I was hanging out with all the Boston comics, and we were all friends, and we'd play softball and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't realize that was networking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just think you hang out with your friends, you do a show, you meet and have a beer afterwards and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And like 3 Boston comics got hired at Conan. Oh, actually 4. The one guy got fired, and then the other guys recommended me. And I sent in a packet, and they were like, "Yeah, okay, start tomorrow." And the show was so shaky then. I thought, well, I'll go do this for 13 weeks or maybe 26. I only had 13-week contracts. Mm-hmm. And then each time, the show kept going and going.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, okay.
At what point did you realize that this was the job and kind of a hit show?
Once we started getting nominated for Emmys, then it was kind of like, oh, okay, I think that we're kind of established now to some extent. Because writers would leave and they would go to work on sitcoms and go to other things. So, and some people went on to bigger and better things, Bob Odenkirk and Louis C.K. and but even writers who went on to write on sitcoms that you wouldn't know their names, they had great careers in sitcoms or whatever. But then there'd be guys that leave and then you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
So it was like, ooh, do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So just having 2 little kids and whatever. So I didn't leave.
Yeah.
You know?
So you're the bulk of your time, your professional life was writing during the day you'd be writing with
Yes.
Conan, and then you'd still be gigging and hitting the road and
Yes.
performing comedy.
And the
in
nice thing
evening.
about New York
It's amazing. What a great deal.
Well, I could do 2 or 3 shows in a night in New York. And
Right.
so what I would do is I would do 2 or 3 shows in a night, and then I'd take the next night or 2 off and stay home with my little kids and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
What a dream.
You know, Saturdays and Sundays, going to their games and all that stuff, you know. Trying to have that balance. It did work out that I wasn't on the road all the time as a comic, where I know these comics that they don't get to see their wife and kids. They're away all the time. So I was lucky in that I didn't have to do that, you know.
More than that. I mean, you fit in time because Brian has written 2 books that I saw, The Astounding Misadventures of Rory Collins and Maybe Kevin.
Yes.
Which both sound fantastic. And when I was reading the description, they're not focused on the life of stand-up comedy. They're fiction.
Oh, no, not at all.
And maybe Kevin even, it's not necessarily a funny story at all. Is that right?
No, yes. They were very dark stories. And it was very liberating for me to write a story and have characters as opposed to just writing short jokes all the time. Do you know what I mean? And swearing and having and it was like when I wrote Rory, what happened was I was taking this writing class, I wrote what I thought was a short story. So I read that in class or whatever, and the teacher's like, well, that's not a short story, that's the first chapter of a novel. And I was like, what? So then each week I'd bring in, so the woman would be like, okay, so-and-so, we're going to hear from, this person's going to read their thing, and this person's going to read their thing. Brian's going to read from his novel. And I would want to burst out laughing. Like, what?
Brian's
Do you know what I
novel.
mean? Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when we got taken off the air with the Tonight Show thing, then I had all the time. So then I would put in, 3 hours a day of, okay, I'm going to get up, shave and shower, and go write and not just sit around all day and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it kind of gave me something to do.
Yeah.
And but I didn't know what I was like. I would have an idea of what the chapter was going to be about or whatever, and then I would write it, and it would be like my actors always try to be TV clean and go on TV, and this was just very dark and dirty and whatever and twisted, and sometimes I'd finish it. And at the end of the day, I'd be like, wow, why did I write that? Like, what is wrong? You know what I mean?
Brilliant.
Like, yes.
It's got to be such a cool, creative situation to have used one part of your brain, the quick, family-friendly,
Yes.
funny, TV-ready side of your brain for so many years. And also not just comedy, but comedy that is going to be spoken, I imagine, largely by yourself or Conan. Like,
Right.
who's going to tell these stories, how
of
they're going to
course.
be delivered. When you write a book, as you said, not only do you get to sort of inhabit a lot of different characters, you get to follow the course of this journey.
Yes. And the
as
story
far as you want.
Absolutely. And the
What a
story took me
dream.
where it's like, oh, I didn't know it was going there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the story had a life of its own.
So when you arrived here today, and I see you've got your notes, I'm so excited to get started. And you said to me, I love coming on the podcast and talking about history because you don't get bored with this stuff
yes.
like everyone else in my life
Yes.
gets bored
Oh my
with
God,
this
the
stuff.
rolling eyeballs and I was like, oh, please, no.
And even my husband, who you met when you
Yes.
first got here, who was a guest on episode 5, he did me the honor of sitting down and being a guest for me one time. He sees me coming with a book and this look on my face, and I see his body language get like, settle in. Because she's
Yes.
coming over here
Well, that
like
was-
an evangelical
Yes.
coming up to my door, and I know
That's
what's
so
coming.
funny. Well, that would be the running gag with my wife. Like, I would have a 700-page book about Nixon, and I'd be like, don't worry, when I finish it, I'll let you borrow it or whatever. And no one is interested in borrowing it,
Yeah. Oh, or on the other hand, though, he'll call me over because we do get these fuckable little nuggets from history.
Yes.
These incredible characters. I
Yes.
mean, it's why we're all so intrigued. And then you meet people out in the world that would find it very interesting. And I see him at a party looking, and and he's gesturing wildly. Come here.
I found one.
He really wants to know.
That's so funny.
And it's like easier than pulling it up on his phone.
Yeah, don't tell me, tell this guy. Oh, that's so funny.
It's like a foxhole, right?
Oh, I love that. The other thing that happens to me is, when you're a comic and you're a comedy writer, and I know you have this, when you're watching things, you're watching comedies on TV, a lot of times I'm not laughing. Do you know what I mean? I'm thinking, and sometimes I'm thinking, that's funny, or that was so well done, or whatever. But you're kind of analyzing, and it's hard to just. And my daughter would get so mad at me because we'd watch some show that we both like, and she'd be like, "You're not laughing." I'm like, "No, it's good, it's good." But I will be sitting by myself, reading a history book, and I will laugh out loud because there's something that happened that you're totally not expecting anything humorous. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was reading one. It was about the founding fathers and this and that, and they just talking about Dolly Madison, and they used the phrase. They said something about Dolly Madison's generous bosom, and just the phrase "generous bosom," I am dying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where the last that it's like I'm sure like when I'm on an airplane, I must look like a lunatic where I'm reading a book about 1776 and I'm doubled over. They must be like,
What's this guy?
a deranged man here.
Yeah.
But I mean, come on, her generous bosom. How can you not laugh
This
at that?
elaborate woman.
And
Come
also
on.
some historian 80 years ago, like that's they had to why did he even?
Okay, so we know Dolly's got big tits. Is
Yes,
this the deal?
yes,
Okay, so Dolly's got
exactly.
big tits, and
let's-
people talk about
and
it.
It's 200 years later. We're still talking about them. They really must have been something.
They must have been amazing. Oh, Brian, I am just in nerd paradise with you right now. It's like, and we got the Post-its and your multicolored highlighters. I was so excited that you agreed to be a guest. And often what I do then is I say, what do you want me to research for you? Or what are we going to talk about? What subject curls your toes? And you came back and you said, I just want to talk about stuff in history that makes us laugh.
Yes.
Which I thought was such a great idea. And so what I've done is I've accumulated some of my favorite stories.
Great.
And I know that you've brought some of your
Yes.
stories as well. So we're going to kind of take
Yes,
turns.
yes.
think
I feel like
going
mine
back-
will be little quick ones, but
I'm so thrilled. As I was kind of trying to figure out, what is it that makes me laugh? What are the things that have kind of pulled out? I found that I tend to be most drawn to great mistakes. The ones where just some asshole really stepped in it. I think one of the reasons why I keep coming back to them and I like to talk about them and I like to research them is the same reason that I watch Hoarders or TMZ. There is this weird human comfort that we all get when you see someone else really fuck up.
That's so funny. I'm always envisioning the aftermath. So after the guy fucks up or whatever, you know, and then he's going to go and he's in the Oval Office with the president. It's like, hey, what the fuck? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
What
that's
happened?
the stuff I'm projecting what happens after the fuck up.
Yeah.
And
Someone's got to
imagine that.
tell you,
Yes.
who do you have to sit down and be like,
and
so
explain.
I put this
Yes.
in my eye because I thought, and you're like,
Yes.
oh no.
Yes.
Exactly. It's not all look at this idiot for me anyway, because it is about redemption. I think when I encounter these horrible situations
Yes.
or these, I think, but they got through that. We got
Yes.
through that. They didn't just drop dead. They woke up the next day and moved on with their
Yes.
life. And,
And for me, a lot of times it's the envisioning the whole thing and people's I don't know. It's like it just kind of plays out in my mind like a little mini movie, and I'm just laughing about it.
I'm so excited. So why don't you take it away and give me your first
All right,
first
I'll give you my first
story.
one. So this, I don't know if I'm supposed to footnote or whatever. I think this was, as I recall, it was in Nathaniel Philbrick's book, The Mayflower.
Okay.
And it's all about, the Pilgrims arriving and all this stuff. They capture a Native American who's 7 feet tall. It's this oddity. And they bring him back to London. And they're like, look at this guy, because they had brought back other Indians, but this guy was like, look, So when he's there, he realizes, he's like, oh, these people like gold. So he says to them, he goes, I know where there's a gold mine on Martha's Vineyard, but only I know where it is. And they're like, oh, there's a gold mine. And, well, will you show us? He's like, absolutely. So they put him on a ship, and they're coming back across the ocean. And as soon as they sight Martha's Vineyard, he dives overboard, swims away, and they never see him again. And I laughed so hard at him outsmarting them, and then them being like, oh, fuck. Do you know what I mean? Where that's where I picture them coming back, and they go, well, do you have the gold? We don't have the gold. Well,
why?
Do you have the Indian? Here's the thing.
He was so tall.
And I just thought that was so funny.
Oh my God. So this is the history that we
Yes.
have, which means that either nobody thought enough to lie about it.
Right.
And be like, he overpowered us. He was 7 feet tall.
Yes.
I mean, he broke 3 guys' necks. And then he, but just to be like, no, he said he'd be right back. And we waited. Boy, we waited.
We waited, and
he never came
you
back.
have no idea how long we waited.
Oh my
and just
gosh.
that's just that knowing that someone also got called into the carpet after that, like, you took a ship all across the ocean for the, and those it just made me laugh so hard.
So great.
Yeah.
Don't you wonder too, like, as the guy coming back, how do you explain to your Native American brothers and sisters the boat ride?
Yes. Oh, the whole
let
thing.
alone London. And it also, I feel like these are the lessons too that maybe deep in the recesses of your mind, you find yourself someday a hostage.
Right.
And you think to
Absolutely.
yourself, well, these guys seem to like cocaine. You know what? I know where there's a cocaine
That's so
mine
funny.
in Wisconsin.
But it's also so fun that they're thinking, well, he couldn't possibly outsmart us. Where you know what I mean? And
This savage
yes,
mine.
absolutely. And just them getting their comeuppance like that in such a humiliating way. Oh my God, I was dying.
Oh, that's great. What a great story. This is the story of the Children's Crusade. Are you familiar with the Children's Crusade?
Didn't go well. Yes. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler
didn't
alert.
go well.
And really, you can pretty much assume that none of the
What
stories
a terrible
of the Crusades.
idea.
What terrible.
But also, this one, it's bad enough with the soldiers didn't go well.
Yeah.
Now we're going to send children. It's
Yeah,
like, come on.
and so if you're not as familiar with the Crusade, this is, the endless wars between Christians and Muslims over their shared holy city of Jerusalem. So all of our monotheistic religions have the same fucking city as their most holy city. And over the course of many hundreds of years, they fight over whose temple and how the pilgrims are treated. And this is basically the beef of the Crusades. The first Crusade, the Christians win. They take the city, but then it all falls apart, and it goes back and forth hand to hand. The Children's Crusade takes place in 1212, and it is right after the Fourth Crusade. And the Fourth Crusade's note is that was the one where the Christian army, on their way to Jerusalem to fight the Muslim infidel, stopped instead in Constantinople and burned the Christian capital to the ground.
As you would. Why wouldn't you? Right.
And so the Pope is starting to think perhaps we've lost our way in these crusades. And the Christians of the world are starting to think this isn't going terribly well. But have they lost the hope of reclaiming Jerusalem? No, at least not. A boy named Nicholas of Cologne. He has a profound vision, this kid. God speaks to him, says the reason we keep effing up these crusades is because we are using violence. Violence and murder? Come on, I'm
Right.
Jesus.
Right.
Okay, peace. The meek shall inherit the earth,
Sure,
Nicholas.
sure.
Here's what we need to do to fix all this is I need the children to go into Jerusalem and slay the enemy with their innocence. And Nicholas is like, that sounds like a fucking plan, God. And he gets the children of Europe
And
together.
how old is Nicholas?
Nicholas is about 12, 13 years old. And the head count of children that ultimately follow him is about 30,000.
Oh, my God.
I know. So 30,000 kids, all in a roughly teenage years, walk across Europe. And again, the history of the Crusades, this is where we always get into a little bit of a bump, which is the Mediterranean. Okay, it's big. I don't know if you look at that map, lady, it's big. And it's hard to go around it.
Yeah.
And you got to get food.
Sure.
So getting across the Mediterranean is always a trick. And they kept saying, Nicholas, kiddo, what are we going to do when we get to the Mediterranean? And Nicholas was like, come on. We are on God's side. God doesn't fuck with water. He can part it. He can walk on it. Don't worry about it. Okay. So they get to the Mediterranean. Then miraculously, just like Nicholas said, 7 huge ships emerge. They come out. Dude gets off the lead boat, and is like, kids, I'm here. God said you needed a lift, son. Nicholas is like, fucking A, right?
Right.
All aboard, everybody. Okay, so these kids get on these 7 ships.
This is unbelievable. Oh, my God.
2 sink off the coast of Sardinia. Everyone dies. But 5 of those ships do go successfully to Africa, where all of those kids are sold into slavery.
So,
And that was the Children's Crusade.
I've been a 12-year-old boy. And I had a lot of dumb ideas as a 12-year-old boy. And could you... it would have been terrible things would have happened if everyone listened to me as a 12-year-old.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
I have never met a 12-year-old boy that wasn't full of terrible ideas.
Yes.
And I don't think anyone knows it more than 12-year-old boys. I feel like 12-year-old boys look around at each other and think, this is terrible. But these knights and 4 crusades worth of awful were just like, I guess. I mean, why not? And plus, when God talks to you in 12:12,
right?
Who's going to say... Here's an interesting footnote I learned about this story later, is that the families of these kids were pretty mad. And they didn't know exactly who, God, it wasn't God's fault, of course, and they didn't know who. Ultimately, Nicholas's father was arrested and executed by the angry families
of all
of these kids that followed Nicholas.
Yes, he should have said, no, I'm sorry, we're going to, go to medieval Disney or whatever instead, and not. Yes.
See, so even in 1212, parents were responsible for their
that's
idiot
so interesting
teenage
that they
children.
were like, "Hey, buddy,
come on."
Yeah.
All right, what do you got next for me?
So this is. So I don't. Did you see the movie The Right Stuff?
Is that about pilots?
It's about pilots and NASA. It's like the first NASA. So it's a very memorable scene in that. It's a true story where John Glenn goes up and he is orbiting. He's the first American to orbit the Earth, and he's going around. And at one point, the sun is coming up, and there's all these little sparkly things around his spacecraft, and the light is reflecting off it, and it's all this, so it's like these little tiny prisms, like all these different colors. It's whatever. He starts crying. It's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen, and he's telling them what's happening, what he's seeing. He's like, "Oh my God, this is so beautiful." He's crying, and they don't know what it is. For years, they don't know what it is. So a few years ago, they discover what it is. It was his pee. Because, they had where they would, eject the pee. They had like a little thing, and they would eject the pee out into into space. And it was cold, and it would froze. Crystallized. And the light's shining off it. And these little and the most beautiful thing, they're like, oh, that was your urine.
Oh my God.
Yes.
That is not only is that really funny, it is also kind of beautiful.
Yes.
that the composite material of your own body,
absolutely,
once in the alien vastness of space, brings you to tears.
And he's thinking this is some kind of intergalactic, you know what I mean, like outer space thing. It's like,
but he never knew it. You said they only found that out recently.
I don't know if they found that out before he died or not.
Can you imagine the hypermasculine NASA energy?
Oh my God!
Somebody's peeing on him. Like, you know what I mean? Somebody hears this story and is like, "Hey, John Glenn, heard you like,
Yes. Oh my God.
All right, here's my next one for you, Brian.
Yes.
It's called TULIP MANIA. Are you familiar?
I am in Holland. Yes. I love it.
So this is 1634 Holland. And at this point, listen, in the Netherlands, the Dutch, they are the most economically advanced society on the planet. They have, we know the spice trade. They got all that stuff.
And they're punching way above their weight for a little country where they've got colonies around the world and so
colonies around the world. Yes. They're running everything. Their ships are incredible.
They're great businessmen.
Great. And one of the things they've done with all this wealth is invent economic infrastructure, like the stock market and the futures trade.
Incredible.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So in the midst of this old monk named Carlios Clusius, no jokes there, gets this rare tulip bulb that only he has. And this thing is fucking stunning. Anyone who sees these things when they bloom is overwhelmed because it's like lightning bolts of color shooting up every petal. And every petal is like dynamic and unique, and they're impossible to find. And how did you get this? And he won't share it with anybody. So then there's like a combination of factors. It's rare, and only certain people have access to it. As we know, that's an economic function. Also, the reason these tulips are so colorful and look the way they do is because of a virus that spreads from tulips.
Right. So it's like a flaw.
So you want the virus. It's a flaw.
Yes.
So they want this virus in order for the tulip to look this way. But the virus only travels through the bulbs and not through the seeds. And if you have a bulb, it takes like 7 to 12 years for it to flower, but the seeds will flower in a shorter period of time, but they won't necessarily have the color. So I am not a money person. I don't understand economics much at all.
Yeah.
But this is the sort of primordial soup for economic predictions in terms of people being like, okay, so 5 to 7 years for this to turn into something that will then multiply, and this multiplies at a slower rate, and then the likelihood of the colors and the petals, and then who would buy it and how far would they buy. And so they start to establish this very highly lucrative futures market on tulips and tulip bulbs, and it becomes one of their number one economic functions. And the way it's traded, how it's traded, who gets it, to the point where at its peak in 1636, tulip bulbs that didn't even exist yet were trading hands 10 times a day. People were trading estates, family estates worth millions for like 3 tulip bulbs.
That's so unbelievable.
People are exchanging their children as dowries for tulip bulbs. One guy was executed for eating a tulip bulb that he thought was an onion.
The guy's minding his own business. He's having some onion rings.
Exactly. And these guys come in. They're like, hey, that's funny. Yeah.
They're like, tulip rings isn't a thing. What are you doing?
Not yet. And so it's obviously completely out of control. And the bubble burst. The first bubble we get burst because like all bubbles and all futures market, it hinges on how much someone will pay for this stuff. And once they come wise that this is not worth it, overnight, it completely dissolves. It all falls apart. It obviously didn't completely destroy Holland. They recovered from this.
And I also love the idea of somebody who's not from Holland visiting, maybe from a different culture or something, and being like, what? Like an outsider must have been like, what?
Especially like this poor sack who ate the tulip bulb. You know, you're like, even if somebody was like, oh my God, buddy, that's not an onion, it's a flower. And you go, oh, are you telling me I've been poisoned? Like everyone seems so upset.
I had a tulip sandwich last week. It was delicious.
It was delicious.
Yes,
it was so
leave the guy alone.
Listen, I want to take a short break.
Okay.
We will probably be talking about history during the break also. But just in case you need to also go to the bathroom or something. And then we're going to come back with more of our great mistakes.
Hey, it's Christine Blackburn from Storyworthy. Every Tuesday, listen to a brand new Storyworthy with fantastic comedians like Avi Lieberman, Bruce Baum, Steph Tulliff, Dawn Brody, Ed Krasnick, and Angela Johnson-Reyes. Plus, you'll hear true stories from other fantastic people like author Marion Keyes, author Haley McGee. How about hearing a true story from the one and only Peter Brady, Christopher Knight? Well, that's the kind of entertainment you're going to hear over on Storyworthy. So check out Storyworthy, brand new every Tuesday. And one more thing, make it a Storyworthy week.
Have you been listening and thinking, oh, I've got a great history story I bet Dawn would love? Well, you're probably right. I can't wait to hear it. Have you been thinking, I have a history question that I want Dawn to answer for me? Well, I live for that kind of stuff. Are you nuts? Hit me up. Our email is hilfpodcast@gmail.com. We are at HILF Podcast on Instagram. Many of you have reached out already, which I love. So many, in fact, that we will be doing a listener question episode down the line. I know, sounds fun, right? Catch it all and be a part of it when you...
Follow me, follow.
We are back. We have had fluid adjustments.
Yes.
Before we go on with more hilarious fuck-ups and stories that make us laugh from history, I do want to know who was the first comedian you remember seeing, identifying with, thinking, yeah, that's a job I think I'd like to do.
When we were in the 6th grade, well, I mean, I always loved jokes, and I remember I got in trouble when I was in elementary school. I was in like the 2nd grade or something, where I took a joke book out of the library. It was the first book I took out of the library, and I didn't return it. But I wanted to keep it. And they're like, you got to return it. And my brother's like, you can renew it. You can just say, go back there and say you want it again. And I was like, that's too risky. I got to hold on to this. You know what I mean?
What if they say no?
Yeah. And I got in trouble and it's just funny that it was a joke book, you know. But when we were in the 6th grade, we read this book as a class by Dick Gregory. So Dick Gregory was this African-American comic in the 50s, 60s. And then he became like a political comedian, then became like an activist or whatever. But this time he was just a comedian.
Yeah.
We read this book as a class, and he would talk about spending all day thinking what was funny, what made people laugh, and all this stuff. And I remember just being like, that's so cool that that's your job. And that made me want to be a comedian, but I didn't know how to be a comedian. Do you know what I mean? Because there weren't comedy clubs when I was a little kid. It wasn't something you heard about. So even though I never saw him perform, I think I finally, like when I was in my 30s, I saw him at the Museum of Television. I went and watched him do a stand-up set.
Nice.
But just reading that book, I think that planted the seed of like, oh, you can actually be a comedian as your job.
Yeah. Like the chemistry of a joke.
Yes.
How it works.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm looking across the table at my friend Brian. He's got a list.
I do.
I'm so excited about this.
I was reading a biography of Ben Franklin, and it talked about this. So in the 1770s, the Montgolfier brothers, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, they invent the hot air balloon. Oh. Can you think about it? I mean, prior to that, anything in the sky was a bird or a bat, I guess, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, so they send it up as a test run. It's just the balloon.
Okay.
And they send the balloon, and it goes up, and it drifts away, and it drifts like 30 miles away. Oh. And it starts running out of gas, whatever. So the villagers in this town 30 miles away are like, what the hell is that? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So the whole village chases this thing, and they don't know what it is. They're thinking it's like an alien or something. You know what I mean? Like an alien spaceship or something.
Sure.
And it finally comes down and lands, and they beat it with sticks.
Of course they do.
They surround this thing, and they're whacking it, and they're whatever. And that image just made, I was dying.
Oh my God.
You know?
What year is this?
1778 or something. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, you know what's hilarious
Yes.
is that I can't imagine many neighborhoods in America today would behave much differently.
Oh, absolutely. It's like human nature doesn't change. And these people, they've never seen anything like this.
Anything like it.
And they're terrified. They have no idea. And just them. And it's funny to me. It's like, they weren't just fascinated by it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yes, that would be fascinating. No, they're terrified. We've got to do something about this. This is an attack.
Right.
Yes. And then
Get it.
beating this, you know.
Oh my God. And like you talked about how the things that you wonder, like this poor guy, when he went to get his balloon, had to be like, what'd you do to it?
What? That's my baby. Do you know how long we crafted this thing? You know?
Right. And then be like, well, yeah, I suppose I could have guessed they would have thought this was either God or an alien.
Yes.
That was why. Did you see the movie Cowboys versus Aliens?
I didn't.
I fucking loved
Oh,
that
you
movie.
did?
I did. I don't remember why. I love Harrison Ford.
Right.
So I will lay down in traffic. You know what I mean?
Sure, of
so
course.
they put him in a cow. And Daniel Craig never hurt anybody.
Well, he does hurt people, but I see what you're saying.
But beautifully, so elegantly. Really good. It's silly. But the thing that I found so intriguing about it is that it is, just as it says, Cowboys versus Aliens. But your point about there was nothing in the sky, why it's so interesting to have a super sci-fi movie set in the Old West is because watching the cowboys try to figure out what this is, we've always, in my lifetime, anything in the air could be a weather balloon,
Absolutely.
An airplane,
Yes.
a rocket. Now it could be a drone. It could be a number of things. But
Yes.
for cowboys, it was trying to find the words. I think they called it a freight train in the sky. Just even hearing the writers use what examples they would have had.
Right.
I thought it was fascinating.
So fast. I love it.
Give me another one.
Okay.
Hit me again.
So this is one. I don't know if you know the story. So when Jimmy Carter was running again, so he's the president.
Yes.
He wins in 76. So he's running for re-election in 1980
against Ronald Reagan.
And things had not been going well for Carter.
Poor Jimmy.
You know, poor Jimmy. And like his heart was in the right place. Yes, he really. And he had such bad luck. You know, you travel to different places and you get off the airplane and the local population they greet him. And they would have a band there, like sometimes like a local high school band or whatever, and they would play this song, "Marching Through Georgia," which is a famous song, and That's a song about Sherman burning Georgia to the ground. Do you know what I mean? Like marching through, it's all destruction. He's just coming in and destroying Georgia, whatever. And it's like, look, he's from Georgia, and Georgia's in the name, but that is not.
Guys.
This, yes. And Carter would be like, that is not a Southern song. Like, he would cringe. And no one's like, guys, could you read the lyrics here, maybe? Because somebody, do you know what I mean?
Anything.
And they have no idea that it's infuriating him, and it happened dozens of times, like wherever he went. He's in Michigan. There's a local high school. We've got this song that they practice for months. It's like,
no.
So, and then one time he was fishing, and this rabbit. First of all, I didn't know rabbits could swim. Apparently,
yeah.
Yes.
Crazy.
So it was a swamp rabbit that was being chased by some hounds, jumps in, and is swimming at him, and he's got to knock it away with his oar or whatever. And it was really like a nothing story. But somehow it got created. There was a killer rabbit attacking Jimmy Carter. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of like the Carter had, where it's like, this is a story that it should have never seen the light of day. It's just a nothing thing.
Yeah.
But it turned into, of course, Carter. Like, whatever.
Poor guy.
But this is the one I really want to tell you about. So he's at the Democratic convention, and he's giving the big speech. Things aren't going well for him, but if you can give a killer speech at the convention, maybe kind of turn things around.
Jimmy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So he's revving them up, and they're, and he's going, the Democratic Party is a party of great leaders. We have Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harry S. Truman, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Baines Johnson. So they're just, they're really with him.
Loving it.
And he goes, and a man who would have made a great president, Hubert Horatio Hornblower. Horatio Hornblower was a movie, and I think it had been a book. It's a pirate movie. It's a book starring Gregory Peck.
Yeah, I was just like,
Yes.
Horatio Hornblower.
Yeah. So I can't remember. I think it was a book first, then it became this movie with Gregory Peck. But it was just this Freudian slip. But you hear the crowd go, Hornblower? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, no.
And especially then, like if it was one thing if he's in the middle of nowhere giving a speech and he makes the flub,
and it's still the 70s. It's not going to be on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But no, especially in those days, there's 3 networks, that they're all covering this. So
and they're waiting for him to fuck up.
Absolutely. So there's 50 million or 60 million people watching this, and it's like, Hornblower, do you know what I mean? And you see him cringe, and then he goes, Humphrey. But it was too late. And, and my brother and I were talking about, we were teenagers and we're dying.
Yeah.
And what we really wanted to happen after that is for him to take his briefcase, just put the papers in, close it up, and just never be heard from again. You know what I mean?
Walk into the street.
That's that. It's like, guys, I tried. Oh, well. Yeah. And then, but, oh my God. And you can find it on YouTube, and it's just, it's so funny.
And the party of a great man who should have been president and who would have been one of the greatest presidents in history, Hubert Horatio Hornblower. Humphrey.
I feel like that sort of devastation really is only physically felt in a quiet exit.
Yes.
Like, as much as you want to punch the microphone and just bang your head into the podium, instead you just put the cap back on your pen and you hope that your heart stops beating before you get to the car.
I know I'm sure he had 20 more minutes in that speech, but no,
you didn't.
Just go, okay.
Yeah,
and
enjoy.
just
and being president's hard. He already had one here.
Guys had one term.
Don't worry about it.
That's good enough. I'll see.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Listen, I have a new one for you, Brian, because I'm so delighted to tell you about this. I'm wondering if maybe you've even seen it in real life. It is an existing building. So I did my first story 1212 AD and then 1600 columns. This is a living history. It is available in the world right now. It is a building in London in the financial district. It's a brand new high-rise that was built since the millennium. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of, it looks really interesting. It's sort of growing upwards and outwards, almost like a growing plant, or like if you took like a rectangle made out of Play-Doh and just stretched it up and out a little bit. It's a very interesting design. It was approved in 2006 by the architect Raphael Valloni. I'm not pronouncing that right. They began construction in 2009, and in 2014, it was completed. it was made smaller because it almost overpowered the cathedral. It was so big and beautiful, so they had to make it a little bit smaller. And so its design was very unique, very interesting, and it was promised to have, as its crowning feature, a rooftop public park. That was like the top 3 floors, and part of the reason why it opened up like this, it was this big, beautiful public park, and it needed to be a public park because it was being built in a conservation area, and so the park was kind of part of the linchpin to the whole thing being approved. When it was completed in 2014, the problems began to unfold with this building. One is it's not a park. And it's not public. So the roof has some green space that is open to the air. The designs had these giant, beautiful, full-grown trees and like a water feature. And in reality, it's like some succulents and ferns kind of stuck to a slope. And it's not public. You have to reserve a time. They only have 90-minute slots for a certain part of the day, and the rest of the day you have to pay to use it, or it's only accessible to the people who have already paid these high rents to be in the building. But the building itself is aggressive. Its concave design for a couple of hours every day shoots hot light down on various parts of the streets of London to the point where it reaches degrees of 196 to 240 degrees. It has melted cars.
Oh my God.
It has melted welcome mats. And it's, because of the way the roof is, it's never exactly the same spot. And it's not like as a human being, if you just walk through it, you'd be okay. But with the concentrated light for more than a couple minutes, it is destroying. I mean, there's lawsuits for a guy's whole front bumper turned into like melted butter.
Oh my God.
A journalist fried an egg in a pan on TV to show how horrible and dangerous it is.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
But then also the shape of the building has created these impossible wind tunnels that come, instead of going like down the street, it comes from the top of the building and like pushes people down. So when it's not melting cars and lighting welcome mats on fire, it's knocking people off their feet with these
oh my God, that's so funny.
Of wind. I laughed out loud so many times. It was awarded the Carbuncle Award, which is the worst architecture award in London. The guy who hands it out says, it's a challenge to find anyone with anything positive to say about this building.
Oh my God.
And a city planner said that the building is a daily reminder to never allow such a planning disaster to ever happen.
Oh, that's
again.
What's the name of the building again?
The building, it is nicknamed the Walkie-Talkie because it's kind of what it looks like. Some people call it the Sky Scorcher instead of the Skyscraper. But after it was revealed that it was melting cars, they call it the Fryscraper.
The Fryscraper. Oh my God, that's fantastic.
I've not seen it. I know I have some listeners in London. If you know about the Fryscraper, please tell me
here's the other thing. Like, don't you love like multi-million-dollar fuck-ups?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And I like the idea. You talk about this architect, right? This poor guy. And people are like, how dare you? And he's like, you know what?
I took a big swing.
You guys fucking loved it. Yeah, and like the person who the company that owned the building sold it, and now how much you pay for rent? It's like owned by this awful. Oh my God, awful, and
burning 240. Oh my God,
243 degrees for a couple of hours a day. This thing is just a magnifying glass on the city of London. And like, what do you do?
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. Oh my God.
Oh my God, and they said they've strung up some shades. They're trying to put up some triangular curtains and things.
I'm Irish. I would be killed instantly just walking by that.
Yes, you would be. You'd be a little Brian McNugget.
I would. Oh my God.
Oh, I know. And like, it's got to be painful too, because I like to think that, especially with things like architecture and there's a lot of ego and a lot of like.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
yes, he's this genius that built this building. It's like. Oh my God, that's so fantastic.
All right, hit me again. Okay. I want more.
All right, so I went to what's called a museum.
Oh.
And it's a museum of media in Washington, D.C. My son was doing an internship there, and I was visiting him. Anyway, I go to this museum. I go in the men's room, and above the urinals, they have these different headlines that are just, just screwed up headlines or whatever, people making a mistake. And there was a headline so in 1976, Reagan ran against President Ford for the Republican nomination. So, and almost beat him. The headline was supposed to say, talking about the polls, it was supposed to say Ford and Reagan neck and neck in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. But no, the headline says Ford and Reagan neck in New Hampshire. And for you younger people, that means they were like making out. And the idea that these two old Republican guys, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I saw that. And I could not, I literally came out of the bathroom, like doubled over crying. And my son was like, what is it? I was like, it was one of these, also when you start laughing where you're kind of like in public and you're kind of trying not to laugh.
Yeah.
It's like you're laughing in church or whatever.
It's the best.
And you're like, oh my God, I cannot stop now. People are always shocked when I'm helpless laughing. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm usually pretty reserved and I'm like, yeah, that's funny, whatever. But every once in a while, it's like, look, you could just knock me over, and I'm just totally helpless here.
Yeah, I can't. Like, this is the business. The comedy is my business, and yes, I can't.
This is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And also, I'm picturing those two, and also the two most unlikely. Do you know what I mean? Right. Like, never in a billion years. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they would be so appalled by it. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, I was dying.
Oh, what a dream! And you too, like, and necking is so their word.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I never used that word in my life.
Yeah.
But that's like a word from the 50s or something. Do you know what I mean?
You know what I love, though? I love that. The wordplay. I have a friend, English is a second language, and she was, I think, like 35 when she got the Uranus joke. And yes. I was like, the Uranus, the wealth of humor that comes to you in third grade or whenever
yes.
you realize that anus is the grown-up word for butthole.
Yes.
And that we have this planet called Uranus.
Why did they do that?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. But just watching her in her 30s be like, Uranus! And we were all, as adults, being like, that is as funny as you think it is. It is totally as funny as you think it is. But we all just went through that.
Yes. We've heard it a million times. So we're not laughing at it now. However, it's great that you've discovered this.
It's a butthole in the butthole planet. Yes, that is the joke. All right. Hey, you know what I think? I think we have time for one more.
Okay.
Will you give me, I know you've got more. Can you dig deep in your own annals to find one more?
Okay, there's a lot of pressure on this one. Okay, so I think I'll do the Squeaky Fromme one.
Ooh.
So this was so I saw this on the History Channel when the History Channel used to show history, which it doesn't anymore, which enrages me. But anyway, I loved it in the beginning.
Like music, like MTV and the History Channel. What the fuck happened?
Yes, I don't know what happened. And I used to love it so much. Now it's like I don't want to watch Ice Road Truckers or whatever. I want to see. But they had this, I think it was about presidential assassins or something. Squeaky Fromme tried to kill President Ford. So she was part of the Manson family and whatever. In this thing, they were interviewing her and him, and they're cutting back and forth between the two of them.
Oh, interesting.
So it was fascinating. And they're not in the same room.
No.
They're separate, but it was just fascinating getting his to talking about it and then her talking. So she decided to shoot the president because she wanted to call attention to the plight of the California redwoods. Makes perfect sense.
Yes.
They shouldn't cut down the redwoods, which I don't think they were doing as far as I know.
Squeaky may have had a few lines crossed.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. There may have been, you would think somebody in the Manson family would have their shit together, but occasionally they had somebody who was a little bit off.
Rudderless.
Yes. So he was going up, he's touring the country and he's going to be giving a speech and whatever. So he's shaking hands with people in the public and they're all coming up as the president and he's shaking hands and the Secret Service men are all around him and whatnot. He's saying, and I spot this woman with bright red hair and she's wearing this red dress and I see her in the crowd. He couldn't help but notice her or whatever. And she's getting closer and he's shaking various people's hands. And he says, I look down expecting to see a hand and I see a gun in my belly. He said, my Secret Service agent, Larry, whatever, somebody jumps on her and somebody else jumps out, and they're all tackling where it's like there's a gun. And Squeaky Fromme goes, so all these people start jumping on me and diving on me. And I said, hey, take it easy. It's like, take it easy. Something. I'm sorry. You're just trying to murder the president.
Take it easy.
Take it easy. I don't think they're overreacting here or whatever. But watching her, I was dying. It's
I was like, what are you trying to do to me, guys?
Guys, chill, please, because...
You're acting like I have some sort of gun in the president's belly button or something.
Yes.
Oh, my God. I'm just a lady in a dress. And you're like, have you seen what they do to people who streak? At the Super Bowl, they break those fucks' naked bodies. Have you ever seen how hard they knock out a streaker? Squeaky, you think they're going to be gentle on you with a gun on the president nicer? Come on.
And I love the idea that she's that they're unreasonable.
Well, it's crazy. I think the recent events of a guy who ran up on stage at the Hollywood Bowl and tackled Dave Chappelle during a comedy show. And I don't know if you saw the pictures of him being taken into an ambulance, but his arm was all turned up the wrong way. He didn't look so good. And I think that his treatment was delivered unto him by a combination of security, because he did appear to have a weapon, and he tried, I think, to appear that he had a weapon, and just Dave's friends.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I wish I had friends like that. If I was, if I'm ever, in some.
Me too. Well, Brian Kiley, I could sit here and talk history with you all day.
Yes.
Please tell me that you will come back.
Oh my God, I'm only did half the things here.
This is so painful to me to see your lid. Wait, give me one more. I got to have one more.
Do you know about the Andrew Jackson parrot?
No.
So Andrew Jackson had this parrot, and apparently he had it in the Oval Office, and he would swear a lot, and this parrot had this filthy mouth. And the parrot, so when Andrew Jackson died, the parrot was at his funeral. So he's the president, former president. There's all these dignitaries from whatever. Yes. And the parrot is letting loose. And in the middle of the funeral. And they're like, whoa, we got to get this parrot out of here. So, yes, they had to usher the parrot out of his funeral.
You know what I imagine, too, is I would be surprised if the parrot was like, fucking
absolutely
James K. Polk, that little dicked piece of shit.
Yes.
Like,
Calhoun can go fuck himself, whatever. And,
oh, my God, that's funny. Actually, I heard something similar, that Winston Churchill's parrot.
Oh.
That he had a parrot also that it outlived him, and whoever inherited Winston Churchill's parrot would hear, fuck the Hitler, fuck the Nazis.
Right. There was a famous story where he was peeing, and then this other political opponent was peeing at the next urinal, and Churchill moved over. He goes, oh, well, every time you see something big, you want to nationalize it. So Churchill was not opposed to a dick joke from time to time.
Oh, who's opposed to a dick joke? Come on. But it does make you think that, I don't think that people this high profile should have parrots. It sounds like it's early surveillance. Like, they're going to be out there literally parroting your...
That's true.
Right?
There could be government secrets let out.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love blowjobs. I'd be like, well, now, where would the bird have heard that? I can't imagine.
Clinton could not have had a parrot. No. Boy,
he could
that his presidency would have been over very quickly.
Promise you'll come back.
I would love to come back. Are you kidding me?
I can't wait. And I am so grateful that you took the time out of your day to come.
And you know what? And in the next year or whatever, when I'll jot other things down that make me laugh. And yes, and I love this. And I just love talking history.
People are going to find my books, 150 years when I'm still a young, sprightly lady. And they're going to find that I have written BK. They're going to try to suss out. Why do I have these little notations, BK, and all of my notes? I'll be like, that's going to make Brian Kiley laugh. Oh, well, thank you again. And I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much. It's so fun.
Thank you again to my guest, Brian Kiley. I think you could hear how much damn fun I just had, and I can't wait to have him back. And thanks again to you for tuning in. I mean, this is all possible because of you and the gift of your time and your interest, telling your friends, sharing the link. It makes all the difference. And each episode is breaking the record the last one set. It's a thrill, and I am so grateful. Now, if you are listening to this on the first day it drops, May 25th, 2022, then tomorrow is our first ever live recording. I mean, it's going to be a wild night of laughter and history and a few surprises, all going down at the Glendale Reading Room in Glendale, California. You can get tickets from the link on Instagram. Now, if you're listening to the show after it happened, you know what? We just had our first ever live recording, and it was a wild night of laughter and history. And boy, those surprises, am I right? You'll be able to see the photos and everything you missed on Instagram. And either way, you will hear this episode right here in July. But up next, episode 17, Joan of Arc. Ding! With my guest, actress and improviser, Lauren Pritchard. Lauren and I have worked alongside each other for years at Universal Studios Hollywood, the entertainment capital of LA, and she is an absolute joy. You will not want to miss it. Until then, this has been HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody, reminding you that history's a party, and everybody's coming.